Welcome, and thank you for standing by. All participants will be on listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, if you wish to ask a question, you may do so by pressing star 1. This conference is also being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I will now turn the conference over to Irene Scricky. Thank you, and please begin.
Thank you. So welcome everybody to our FinEx webinar on TaxTime Savings. I'm Irene Scricky with the Office of Financial Education here at the CFPB, and I'm very pleased to welcome you. Today we will be talking about TaxTime Savings, and we have a guest from the Office of Financial Empowerment here at the Bureau. We say a few background words before we start. First, if I can get my clicker to work here. We always have a standard disclaimer. We're not giving you legal guidance or regulatory guidance or financial advice. It's our opinions. And then quick word about the Bureau. Many of you know this already, I'm sure, but we help to keep consumer financial markets working well by making rules more effective, enforcing rules, and empowering consumers. And we do this through educating consumers, enforcing and consumer protection rules, and also studying, so gathering information about financial markets, about consumer behavior, and doing all that to try to make the markets work better. I am based in the Office of Financial Education, which is within the Consumer Education and Engagement Division. We also have offices that look at special populations, such as older Americans, military service members, and students, as well as our Financial Empowerment Office, who will be our speaker today. And empowerment looks at economically vulnerable consumers, and we're very happy to have Dave Sieminski here with us today. Quick word about FinEx. I always start off with this just to, I think most of you have already joined, but we encourage people to sign up for FinEx, which is a CFPB Financial Education Exchange. It's our way of getting our tools and resources out to financial educators and others who are helping consumers, and also learn back from all of you what you're doing through surveys, through in-person convenings, other ways of hearing your opinions. And so again, if you're already signed up, please encourage others to do so as well by emailing our inbox, CFPB_FinEx@CFPB.gov. We do monthly webinars, as you know. We're on one of them right now. Our next one is on student loan repayment, coming up on October 22nd at 2 o'clock Eastern. So you can register for that by emailing that same FinEx inbox. There'll be more scheduled very soon for months beyond October. We also have a resource inventory that has a list of all the different tools and resources we have for financial educators. It's on our FinEx webpage, which is consumerfinance.gov/adult-financial-education. Very catchy, but that is our URL, and that is has a number of things that will probably be of interest to you. And as I always wind up saying, we also have a financial education discussion group on LinkedIn where you can post your own resources, questions, thoughts, and also see what the Bureau and others are putting up. So thank you for joining us, and I think we are ready to turn to Dave Sieminski with the Office of Financial Empowerment. Before Dave starts, I'll just note, we are going to hold voice questions you ask verbally till the end, but we will give you a chance to do that. But if you have questions during the time when Dave is presenting, there is a Q&A box at the top of your webinar, if you're in the webinar itself, that you can type a question in. I will be monitoring that, so if you have any clarifying questions or burning questions, you can send that to me, and I will ask it of Dave. And then at the end, you'll be able to ask questions verbally. And I know there's always a few people who have trouble accessing the actual webinar system incompatibility. So you can listen in on the audio, and again, this is being recorded, so there'll be a YouTube video where you can actually see all the slides later as well if you're not able to get in today. So thank you for your patience in that regard. And I will now turn it over to Dave. Go ahead, Dave.
Thanks, Irene, and thanks to everybody who joined us today and your interest in promoting saving at tax time. A little bit of background. The CFPB actually has a mandate in the Dodd-Frank Act, which says that we are obligated to encourage wealth building and financial services during the preparation process to claim the earned income tax credit and other federal benefits. And even if we didn't have that mandate, we would likely be doing this work because we recognize, and as I'll describe a little bit in more detail later, The tax time is one of those unique moments in each year, especially for lower income consumers who may be getting refunds, and especially those that may be getting the EITC, to actually have a choice, have the opportunity to make a choice about whether to save or not. And there's a variety of ways that they can save relatively easily. So it's a unique moment. So it's something that I think is worth really pursuing. So I'm sure most people know this, but just in case not, the Earned Income Tax Credit is a benefit for working people who have low to moderate incomes. And a tax credit means more money in your pocket. And effectively what it means is this is a refundable tax credit. So if, for example, you are already due a refund because you've overpaid on your withholding, the EITC would be in addition to that refund that you got. Or if, for example, you owed taxes, the EITC could actually be, if you're eligible for the EITC, a portion of that could be used to, if you will, pay down the amount that you owe. So it's a refundable tax credit. That's what makes it unique, and also it's a huge benefit to a lot of lower income consumers. So a little bit about what we've done so far, and reminding everybody that we're only 4 years old, so we've been doing this work sort of since we were born. But in the first couple years, looking at the couple years that we have, for which we have the most recent data, this gives you an idea of sort of what the total lay of the land is in terms of tax preparation and tax filing. So about 132 million personal returns are filed each year. That's not including corporate returns, business returns. 92 million of households that are filing returns have had an AGI less than 50,000. That's just about 70% of all returns have an AGI less than 50,000. And approximately 27 million of those households, about a third, receive the EITC. And the reason that there's a significant difference is, while the EITC eligibility is income-based, it is also graduated and declines as your income increases. So, for example, a single person with no dependents would only get the Earned Income Tax Credit if made income less than about $14,000 a year. Whereas, for example, a family with 3 kids or more might get some portion of the EITC up to as much as like $53,000 or $54,000 in income a year. So it's graduated, and that's why there's some other eligibility reasons why not everybody who's quote low income receives the EITC. So how do people file their returns? Well, about 3.4 million households, about 2.6%, file their returns through something called the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. That's basically, most of you may be aware, but in case not, there are volunteer tax providers in many communities around the country. They're provided software and training by the IRS, and they literally, in some cases, recruit hundreds of volunteers to help people prepare their tax returns, and it's all done for free. But that's a small portion of the market, primarily because a lot of consumers don't know about VITA, and also because there's a lot of VITA campaigns around the country that just don't have the capacity to serve more people. So that means 71.4 million filers, about 53%, almost 54%, receive assistance from a paid preparer through in-person service. That means, for example, H&R Block, Jackson Hewitt, Liberty Tax, and a whole variety of smaller in-person tax preparers around the country, many of which I'm sure you're aware of in your communities. And then about almost 59 million file by preparing their own returns. And that's, that also could be on paper, but in more and more cases, that's filing electronically using products like TurboTax or H&R Block's product or a variety of other online products that makes tax filing easier. So how do people that receive refunds, how do they handle them? Well, about 85% of households with incomes less than $50,000 receive some sort of a refund. Some of those refunds are really large. Others, may just be a few dollars, but they receive some refund. 63% directly deposit their refunds into account through the tax form. And one of the things that's really beneficial about this is even if you're not saving, say you're direct depositing all your money into your checking account, by direct depositing through the tax form, you can get your refund much faster. So if you're direct depositing your refund, then you get it in something like 8 to 15 days, kind of depends on how busy the IRS is. If you are actually still asking for a paper check, it's going to take 4 to 6 weeks. So it's a lot longer time that you have to wait, and so that's why there's a movement to increasing direct deposit. About 1.5% of filers split their refund using the IRS Form 8888 and have a portion deposited into some sort of savings account. And the split refund option is actually started about 6 or 7 years ago. I don't remember the exact date. But anyway, what it does is it allows you, anybody, to split their refund into up to 3 different buckets, if you will. So you can put some in your checking account, some in your savings account. You could buy a bond with another portion, or you could put it in a variety of other places that they allow you to do through direct deposit. But it's a pretty convenient option, and it allows for flexibility in where people put their refunds. And then less than 1% of filers purchase a Series I savings bond. It's interesting because savings bonds, when I was younger, that used to be the thing everybody had was a savings bond. Parents bought them for kids, and now they've become sort of an antiquated savings feature, a savings way to save. But they still are available. They're available. You can sign up. You can actually sign up and make a direct deposit right through the tax form, and they actually pay pretty good interest, especially compared to the interest rates of in regular savings accounts. So the goals for TaxTime Savings promotion at CFPB are several. First is to offer consumers who have low incomes and low wealth more information and savings options. We want to make sure people know that they can save at tax time and how they can do it. Second is to develop a deeper understanding of consumer decision-making and service provider capability. And so that's really looking at both ends of the process, because vast majority of people are going someplace to get their taxes done. And so we want to understand what the capacity is for those providers to be able to encourage and promote saving. But we also want to make sure that we understand well what the consumer's decision-making process is when they're thinking about their refund. And I'll say a little bit more about that later. But it's an interesting, circumstance, that one time a year when you actually file your taxes. Third is to test the effectiveness of promising approaches in both the nonprofit and commercial environments. And I'll say more about both of those environments later. But we really want to know what it is that would sort of prompt people to think about saving as an option. And so we're continuously testing to see what works and what messages resonate. Fourth is to quantify the consumer benefits of saving, and again, I'll say a little bit more about this later, but what we're really interested in is we presume that if people save at tax time that there's going to be some benefit, that they'll be better off somehow. But we really want to understand and document that better. So we want to understand if people save at tax time, does that sort of reduce the risk that they may have to take out a high-cost loan later in the year, or use other funds, or try to figure out another way to pay for some financial emergency that they didn't anticipate, like the car broke down, or they missed a couple days of work, or a medical emergency. So we want to engage with consumers after tax season to understand how that money was used and whether it benefited them. And finally, we want to learn how and where the CFPB can productively contribute to increasing saving at tax time. So why is saving at tax time important for people with low incomes? Well, first of all, if you think about it, it could be the single biggest check they receive all year. If you think of somebody that's making minimum wage, their bi-monthly paycheck is pretty small compared to, say, for example, a refund where they're eligible for the earned income tax credit, and they may be getting $3,000 or $4,000 back. So it's a unique moment when they have a lump sum that they may never have during the course of the year. For some people, it feels a little bit like found money, although in fact it's not really, but it feels that way, and it gives them an opportunity to make a unique decision. Also, and I referred to this a little bit earlier, building savings can insulate against economic shocks throughout the year. So if you have a little bit of money in savings, then you can smooth out those unexpected expenses that may happen, and it's something you need to deal with. But having that money in savings is a lot easier to deal with than having to go get it when you have nothing left. And then saving while filing your return can be easy and automatic. There are several easy ways to do it, literally right through the direct deposit function of the return. So what are the barriers to saving at tax time? Well, and this Irene can attest to this, I know, and many others who have been involved in the tax preparation field and in the TaxTime Savings world, is that most taxpayers, when they walk in the door to get their taxes done, if they're going to get their taxes prepared at a preparer, have already mentally spent that refund. They know where it's going. They're going to pay for the gifts they bought at Christmas. They're going to pay the past due bills that they've been waiting to pay. They're going to make some major purchase. Maybe it's furniture that they just have needed to buy all year because their old stuff is wearing out, but they just didn't have the money for it. Whatever it is, they've sort of compartmentalized where that money is going to go. And so, talking to them about saving, especially when they're just walking in the door and that's a new option for them, sometimes it's a little hard to sort of get that on the radar. Tax volunteers or staff at tax sites don't have a conversation about saving with taxpayers. In other words, they don't get asked. Like at volunteer income tax assistance sites and even at pay preparer stores, they're focused like a laser beam on making sure they get their tax return done quickly and accurately. And so having an additional conversation about savings options may be something that's not exactly on their radar. Taxpayers don't have their account information, so even if a taxpayer wants to save, they may not have their savings account information with them. And so, having the numbers to enter into the tax form is just not possible, at least in that moment. Taxpayers don't have any kind of account or savings vehicle. They may be unbanked. They don't have a place to put money, and that's where offering options like the savings bond, provides them an alternative, and I'll say more about that in a little bit. And then there are at least some taxpayers that will worry that savings will affect their benefit eligibility. So you may be familiar with the fact that certain public benefits have something called asset limits, wherein you cannot have above a certain amount of savings that you hold and still be eligible for the benefit. And while it's true that actually tax refunds are exempt from the from asset limits, most consumers don't know that. So they assume that anytime they put an additional amount of money in savings that they could be jeopardizing their eligibility. So what we've done in the TaxTime Savings space over the past couple of years, in 2014 and 15, we fielded saving pilot projects of different kinds involving over 75 community VITA campaigns. We provided training to over 250 trainers, and actually that should say who have trained an additional several thousand volunteers. So we've got the word out about the promotion of savings to a lot of people. We've developed and distributed consumer education materials on TaxTime Savings to sites that's serving over 200,000 consumers. We've visited dozens of tax sites to observe saving campaign. I personally have done a lot of those visits, and it's been really instructive to learn what's going on at the tax campaigns themselves at the tax sites. And then we've conducted additional interviews and conversations with more volunteers, site managers, and organizational staff to learn what's working, what's not working in that space. So also what we did in 2015, and I may have mentioned this briefly, but we developed in 2015, this was the first year of a multi-year collaboration with H&R Block to promote saving and to test approaches at scale. As I had mentioned, more than half of people go get their taxes done at a paid preparer. Block has just about half of that, or a little less than half of that customer base. They're the largest in the field. And one of the things that, we were really interested in is, since so many people with lower incomes are going to a paid preparer to get their taxes done, we wanted to make sure that those customers were also getting the word about the benefits of savings in addition to the customers who were just going to VITA campaigns. And also because Block was willing, we were able to test at a significant scale certain types of approaches to encouraging saving, which I'll talk about in a minute. But, it gives us an opportunity to, sort of really test at a high level scale, and we're able to do random control trial studies using the samples of Block customers. The three treatment areas, the three areas that we're testing at a randomized basis are marketing, so getting the word out in advance of tax season through marketing, through email campaigns and things like that to inform people about saving. changing the script at the tax desk so that block tax pros are actually having a conversation about saving with their customers, which wasn't necessarily happening previously, at least not consistently so. And then gamification, which is a sort of broad concept about sort of making saving fun, creating some excitement or incentives to save. Some of the results we observed in 2014 and 15, and this is primarily through our nonprofit work, through the VITA work, is we had over 200,000 taxpayers that had their returns prepared at site using our materials and training. 75% of those taxpayers did receive refunds. 2.7% split their refunds and put a portion into some savings vehicle, and about 2% bought U.S. savings bonds. And while those last two numbers seem pretty small, in fact, they're at almost double what the national average is, because saving rates are pretty low just generally, and have been low. So while we don't claim necessarily any sort of like significant impact on that, we can't say that because of our efforts that saving rate went up, but it's informative to see that those numbers can nudge up, and especially when we look inside the data and looked at individual tax campaigns and what they were doing. Certain ones were much more successful than others. So we learned as much from the sort of qualitative information we've gotten from those conversations as we have from the data that we got regarding the actual numbers of people that saved. So as I said, the learnings that we got from those conversations and from hearing from those various tax campaigns, and even from talking to our friends at H&R Block, were several. And what we've done is we've identified 10 promising practices that we think that could be beneficial in helping people save when they, for example, go get their taxes done at a VITA store or a tax store. And the approaches are primarily focused on the preparers of taxes. So one of the things we recommend is communicate with consumers about saving before they come to the tax site. That speaks directly to that issue that I identified earlier about people having already mentally spent their refund. If they put saving as an option into that mental queue along with their other options, then they're, we think, more likely to actually save when they get to make that decision at the tax store. Second is offer the saving option more than once at the tax site or tax store. So if you offer something to a person who's never thought about it before, and you only say it once, it's likely that might get their attention, but not necessarily sink in. So we think it's a recommended practice to make sure if you're trying to promote saving that you let people know maybe when they come in that saving is an option. Engage with them at other times if you can through the conversation, with them as you're preparing taxes, and certainly maybe make another ask after they find out how much refund they're getting when they can really make a decision. Third is make sure tax preparers know how to help consumers save while filing. One of the things we found out is that there is at least some, especially volunteer tax preparers that we talked with, who sort of didn't know the mechanics of helping people to save in the software that they were using. And so somebody might say, oh, I'd love to save, and then they go, oh, gee, I don't know how to do that, and I'm really busy, and I have another customer coming in. And so that can be off-putting. What we want to do is make sure that the plumbing is all in place so that if somebody says they want to save, then it becomes easy and automatic. Dedicate staff or volunteers to promoting saving. One of the other things we learned from talking to a lot of tax preparers is that there's a lot of staff or volunteers that are there exclusively to prepare tax returns, and that's what they focus on, and that's a really important thing to focus on, making sure that they get it done right, get it done fast, and make sure they help the next customer. So having a little bit of excess capacity, part-time of a staff person or a volunteer whose exclusive responsibility is promoting saving, that allows that person to float and be able to have conversations with people either before they get their taxes done or even during the time they're having their taxes done, and take the burden off of the tax preparer. And then using anchoring and prompts to help consumers focus on savings. And I'll say this is something we learned and is really effective from another body of research that's going on, done by Washington University in St. Louis, working with Intuit, who have used the anchoring approach, the idea of suggesting an amount or a percentage of the return that they may consider saving. So would you think about saving 10% or 25% of your refund if you get it? So planting that seed through anchoring is a way to sort of get people to think about, actually making a decision. So a few more promising practices. Make sure all staff and volunteers are committed to encouraging saving. Everybody's got to be on the same team. If you decide that promoting saving at tax time is what you want to do as an organization or as a tax site, then it's got to work well. So if you have a dedicated savings specialist talking to people about saving, they need to hand that person off to the person who's going to actually help them follow through. And if everybody's not sort of understanding what the process is and is equally enthusiastic and encouraging, then that it may fall flat. The message may fall flat. The next is don't overwhelm consumers with too many different types of options. We've seen a number of times, especially with a lot of nonprofits run these VITA campaigns, and they're multi-service providers that offer a whole bunch of different services, and they want to make sure that the consumer knows about all their services because they have them. This may be the first time they've ever met them or seen them, and those consumers may very well be able to benefit from the other services they provide. But what we've learned, and this is not exclusive to tax preparation, but if you offer people too many options, different things, especially things they've never heard about or learned about before, they may tend to shut down and they may choose none as the alternative. And so if you're thinking about encouraging saving as a priority, then you want to feature that. And even if you're thinking about encouraging some other activity, you want to be able to feature that and make sure that you're not overwhelming people with too many choices that they may not be ready to make. Providing incentives to encourage saving. We've seen several campaigns around the country who have done different things. There's a national sweepstakes around TaxTime Saving offered by an organization called Doorways to Dreams called Save Your Refund, and it's really easy. You can, if you save a portion of your refund, you can sign up for this sweepstakes, and then your name gets thrown out. They have weekly drawings, and then a grand prize at the end of the tax season. But that's exciting for consumers who, the possibility of being able to win some additional money sort of gets the juices flowing, and they're excited about that. And they don't lose anything if they don't win. Their savings is still there, but it's an opportunity that sometimes gets their attention. Also, we've seen other campaigns that have done things like offer small dollar prepaid cards or gift cards or something like that. And when consumers, sometimes it just nudges them to consider saving. And when they do save, they tend to save more than you might expect once they make the decision to save. So there's various ways to offer incentives. Provide multiple options for saving. Now, I mentioned that some people don't even have an account or they may not have their information. So making sure that people know that they could save into a savings bond, or in this year, this will be the first tax season where there actually will be a new retirement account that they can save into called the MyRA. And so making sure that consumers are aware they do have options to save even if they don't have a savings account or don't have the information with them. And then finally, making savings fun. And that means offering the sweepstake as an option, or even making it fun for the people that are the staff or volunteers, so that they know. Sometimes you can get some excitement flowing. When somebody saves, you can, bump up the old thermometer, or ring the bell, or do something like that sort of celebrates that additional accomplishment. So what we're planning for 2016 in the nonprofit sector, we're doing a larger scale pilot with approximately 25 communities. We're literally in the process of looking for proposals or letters of interest on that right now, and I'll say more right at the end about that. We're going to enhance our training using promising practices to encourage saving for tax preparers, and we're going to expand our offering of education and promotional materials for the tax prep marketplace. We're also going to be working with Block for a second year to continue our collaboration, expanded scale in all three of those treatment areas I talked about. We'll do follow-up surveys of savers from year one so that we can start learning about what the benefits of saving were. And then we'll do a report probably sometime early 2016 on the results of year one. These are a few of the other products that we have. So we just recently released a report called Increasing Saving at Tax Time, Promising Practices for the Field. That report talks a lot about some of the things I've talked about in this webinar, and also has some more details on those promising practices. You can download that at on our website. We also will be offering, and available to everybody, but also to for use with the folks in our pilot, a variety of information materials around saving at tax time, different ways to make the most of your tax refund. The sheet on your right, I know you can't read it, but it basically has a little checklist, and one of the options, like under number 2, is, would you like to save a certain percentage of your refund? So we're trying to use those ideas that I've talked about to suggest ways that people can save, and perhaps even an amount that they might want to save. The piece on the right is actually a trifold desktop item that you can, when you glue it together, basically you can set it on top of the desk. So if you're a tax preparer and you're doing somebody's taxes, and the consumer is sitting there sort of for 30 minutes or so while you're doing all your work, and so having something like that on the desk that talks about ways to save might catch their attention. So it's a nice sort of attention getter. Finally, I referred to the pilot that we're doing for this coming tax season, and if you're interested, we are still accepting letters of interest until September 28th, which I believe is next Monday, and you can send those letters of interest. If you are a VITA campaign and you're interested in promoting saving, you can send those letters of interest to empowerment@consumerfinance.gov. Oops, and then finally, if you want to download that TaxTime Savings paper that I just showed you a picture of, you can go to our website, which is our webpage, which is consumerfinance.gov/empowerment. And so that's it. Irene?
Sorry, Dave, I'm here. Unmuting myself. I couldn't find the mute button for a minute. Great. Thank you very much. So I've been monitoring. We haven't had any emailed questions in, but operator, I think we are ready for voice questions. So if you want to give instructions for that, that would be great.
Thank you. At this time, if you wish to ask a question, please ensure your phone is unmuted. Press *1 and record your name when prompted. Again, that is *1 to ask a question over the phone lines. And those questions will take one moment to queue up. Please stand by.
And while we're waiting, Dave, this was terrific. For people who are not directly doing tax time, who aren't themselves, for example, doing tax preparation or running a VITA site, how might you suggest that general financial educators working with clients in other settings might use some of these ideas in their practice?
Well, I mean, I think some of the ideas are basic, and they don't necessarily have to be only used by tax preparation providers. So, for example, the idea of suggesting saving at tax time as an option, for financial educators that are working with clients in July or October or whenever, offering that as an option and talking about the benefits of saving and the easy ways that you can save while filing your return is a good way to sort of prompt them to consider it. And they may have questions that you can answer. So I think that's one way to do it. You're welcome. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be a tax campaign to download any of our informational materials that we have on our website, some of which are just sort of generic information about ways to save that could be used and handed out, at any time and used as a conversation starter. So those are a couple ways that I think that anybody can, sort of encourage people to save, or at least inform them about the savings options at any time of year.
Great. And I just want to note, in terms of the resources that Dave's talked about today, I had mentioned earlier, and some of you are familiar with the resource inventory that's on the financial education page that lists things across the Bureau. These tax time resources are brand new. I am actually updating that resource directory more or less as we speak this week. So they will appear shortly. So they're not in there right now, but you can get them on the empowerment page of our website, as Dave had mentioned. But they will be added to that inventory very shortly. Operator, do we have any voice questions?
I'm showing we currently have no questions.
Great. Okay. Dave, can you tell us, I'll just ask a couple more questions to give people time if they do have any questions that they want to phone in. Talk a little bit more about what the pilot would entail if groups wanted to participate in that.
Sure. What we're looking for is primarily is VITA campaigns, so voluntary income tax assistance campaigns. And as I said previously, for folks that may not be familiar, a lot of these campaigns are operated by nonprofit organizations, United Ways. Sometimes they're actually even offered by, like, for example, a credit union or something like that, although most of them are operated by nonprofits. And there's likely one or more in many communities because they are all over the country. And so if you are either part of a VITA campaign, part of a collaborative that's mounting the VITA campaign, or know an organization in your community that is one, you can send us a letter of interest. And basically what we're asking is just to give us some basic information. You know, talk a little bit about your your work in doing VITA, in preparing taxes, your interest in promoting saving as an option, maybe a little bit about your capacity to encourage saving, and then just anything else that you can tell us. And we're not asking for a lot of information in that letter of interest, so it doesn't need to be a grand proposal of 10 pages. It can be, a page or 2 pages. That just gives us an idea of, and make sure obviously to, include your contact information and other critical information so we know who you are, we know your interest, and a little bit about your local campaign. So I would encourage you, even if you're not a VITA provider yourself, if you know a campaign in your community that you think might be interested in engaging, that you let them know about this opportunity, and they can get in touch at the link that I showed in the presentation.
Great. And Dave, I actually popped the slide back up to that, so that's
great.
on the screen right now of sending letters to empowerment@consumerfinance.gov. And then what would and I know just to reiterate what you kind of said in passing earlier, what would the pilot sites actually be?
Okay. What would they do? What would they have to do?
Well, yeah. What does it mean to be a participant in this?
Yes. So what we're plan on, and certainly the first thing I'll say is we want to make this as low impact as we can, because we understand that if folks are getting ready for tax season right now or in the next couple of months, that period of time is really busy. They're trying to train their volunteers. They're trying to, and then of course when the tax season opens, they're going to be really busy doing tax returns. But what we would ask folks to do is respond to an early survey once we've, if they're chosen to participate, to just sort of give us a lot of logistical information about when they offer their trainings, how they offer it, how many volunteers they have, some things like that will be helpful to us in preparing for the training we'll provide. Then we'll be offering, we'll let them know about all the materials and information that we have, the printed materials and other things, and also some materials for web-based promotion. And make sure that we have that in their hands and in sufficient quantity so they can offer to their customers. We'll ask them to participate in a webinar-based training that we'll offer. We'll offer several of them in December and early January. We understand that we're probably not going to be able to do it live for everybody, because if we have 25 sites, the people offer training at different times. But we'll record one of the trainings and make it available so that you can incorporate it into your training. We'll ask a project lead to participate in probably one monthly quick check-in call during the course of tax season, January, February, March, and then we'll be available for technical assistance if they have questions throughout the tax season. And then finally, we'll ask the participants to give us a year-end report, which will, a small number of data points, number of people who they served, number of people that saved, and a few other details, and then a short narrative report that sort of tells us about what worked, what didn't, what was effective, so that it helps to add to our knowledge base about how to promote saving.
Great, thank you very much. And so actually I just would add something which probably you have all realized, which is that there's a lot of information and kind of public messaging around tax time, when tax time is close, so December and certainly January. One reason why we're doing this webinar and why Dave has these materials out now is because for people planning to do tax prep, there's a much longer lead time to get all that up and running. And I would say even for those of you who don't directly do tax preparation, I think it is good to start thinking now about how you can start talking to your customers and clients about, planning ahead for tax time, thinking about saving, start to plant the ideas and the idea in people's heads now so that, when January comes around, they're perhaps more likely to see the opportunity when it presents itself at tax time. Let's see. Quick check. Operator, are there any questions now?
We still have no questions. Great.
Well, I think we are undoubtedly, Dave. It's because you were very clear, and actually, this is this is really interesting and a real opportunity. And again, even for those folks who don't have who aren't doing this directly, looking for VITA campaigns or other ways to think about partnering around tax time in your own community is a terrific idea. Both using these materials yourselves as well as letting others, again, who may be directly engaged in tax time, we really encourage you to do that. So unless there are any final questions, we will end a few minutes early and give people 10 minutes back. Wait a minute. Here we go. Sorry. There is one emailed question. Let me just read this to you, Dave. Our agency provides tax time education in the community in English and Spanish. What are best practices for this communication? How early are nonprofit providers doing this? So I guess tax time education generally, best practices and early. So we're just addressing that issue of timing.
So early, especially if you're financial educators and you're engaging with consumers throughout the tax year, then any time is good, but especially now as we're in the last couple months before tax season is a really good time to sort of either plant the seed or replant the seed about the opportunities to save. I think because people only file their tax returns once a year, once they get past it, they don't think about it again until it starts to be getting closer to tax season. So for consumers, you want to engage them early, but not, probably not so early that they kind of forget it. For tax assistance providers, a lot of VITA campaigns are starting to gear up now. Some of them have already geared up. They're already starting to recruit volunteers. Some of them probably will start their training in November, and certainly there'll be a heavy amount of training in December and early January. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to have all our materials and training ready before December 1st so that we're catching pretty much the early wave of tax campaigns and their respective volunteers as they're starting to do their training and having all our materials and our training available. So that's kind of the arc of preparation for tax season.
Right, and actually I'll just follow up on that, Dave, because the question sounds like it's also talking about general best practices on communicating around tax time. I know that the whole tax field has done years of work on sort of thinking about different ways to reach people through radio and flyers and billboards and reaching out to other nonprofit groups that could potentially be referrals or public agencies for that matter. Do you want to add anything to that list of?
Yeah. So I think all that is true, and it's and of course it's as you probably know if you watch TV or listen to the radio that it gets to be around December. You start to see ads for the commercial tax preparers, and they obviously have a big megaphone, and so you really have to be pretty diligent to take advantage of whatever resources you are in your community, whether it's the word of mouth or whether it's local TV if you can afford that kind of thing. Maybe you can get contributions from TV and radio, from print messaging. All of those ways that people might normally get information if you can get in front of them with the primary service, which is getting their taxes done for free. And then, of course, if you can also embed a savings message in there too, that's great. But you need to take advantage of, let's face it, the tax field doesn't have tons of money to spend on big blast TV campaigns, but there's a variety of ways and a lot of tools out there and resources to help local campaigns do relatively economically messaging to people who might benefit from the service.
Right, and just a note, again, thinking the question, if you're not actually running a VITA campaign yourself, clearly finding somewhere where you can refer your own clients, if you're just talking to them about the value of tax time savings, is making sure you give someone somewhere to go to act on that. I will note just from the early days of this field, all of maybe 10 or 15 years ago, a lot of people did EITC outreach, so letting people know who might be eligible for the ATC. And I think one of the early lessons from that work was that you let people know about the EITC. It's this amazing benefit for working families, but to actually claim it, you have to, know how to do your taxes and actually claim it. So people were going to paid preparers and ending up spending a portion of that refund to actually get the taxes done. And in some ways, that's where the VITA or free tax prep field came from. So if you're doing general kind of tax education or financial education, the more concrete you can be about giving someone somewhere you can actually go to get your taxes done in a way that will, minimize cost and maximize sort of accuracy and obviously getting all the benefits you're eligible for. That is a real benefit. And there are probably free tax prep programs certainly in almost every major metropolitan area, and there are maybe some other online type options for folks in more rural areas. I'm not sure where that stands, but those are some ideas for just, again, the more concrete you can make it for folks.
Irene, I would add that while it's updated every year, the IRS does have you can go to IRS and you can type in VITA, and it has a search tool that you can search by zip code, and it will give you a list of the, sort of 5 closest VITA sites. And while some of those sites change from year to year, it will give you at least a notion of what's going on in your community and where the closest VITA sites may be. And then, what you may want to do is, especially if it's early, like it's in November, you're thinking about this, contact the organization that runs that VITA campaign and see how you can help.
Great. Actually, one more question from the same person, sort of a very logical follow-up. Are the CFPB materials on TaxTime in Spanish?
Yes, they will be. A portion of them were in Spanish last year. All of them will be in Spanish this year.
Great. And when do those become available?
Our goal is to have them all available by the updated ones by December 1st.
Great. In English and Spanish?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. All right. I don't have any other questions via email. Operator, one last query. Any other phone questions?
I'm sure we have no phone questions.
Great. Well, we're just about coming up on, we're getting very close to 3 o'clock, so I guess we will finish up now. So thank you very much, Dave. Really appreciate it. This is some really useful information. I think people can act on this or share with others in their community who can. And again, thanks everyone for being part of FinEx. We'll continue to have webinars and other events coming up. You'll get them all through the FinEx newsletter. And if you're not signed up, again, email CFPB_FinEx at CFPB.gov. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate your participating. And
thank you.
We are finished.
And with that, we'll conclude today's conference. Again, thank you for your participation, and you may disconnect your lines at this time.